There have been many NBA super teams over the years, with some being more successful than others, with teams like the 2016 to 2022 Warriors ending up with 4 rings, the 2000s Lakers coming out with 3 rings, just to name a few. But in the NBA, super teams don't always end up being successful, whether it comes down to injuries, teammates not working well together, or not enough depth in their roster. Speaking of failed super teams, today we're going to be talking about 2 of the most disappointing super teams in the modern NBA. The 2021 to 2023 Brooklyn Nets and the 2019 to 2024 LA Clippers. Alright, so let's start off with the 2019 to 2024 LA Clippers. In the 2019 offseason, Kawhi Leonard, after coming off a championship with the Toronto Raptors, decided to join forces with Paul George to join the LA Clippers to help rival the LA Lakers, who had just acquired LeBron and AD. Now, despite all of this talent on their team, the best the LA Clippers ever achieved in that span is a conference finals in 2021 against the Suns. One of the main issues with this Clippers team is that one of Kawhi or Paul George was always injured, or they were load managing because they didn't want to play games because they were against easy teams or something like that. They went through a lot of injury troubles, with both of them only playing 49% of games together. So Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, their superstar duo, only played 49% of games together. Imagine paying all that money for a superstar duo and then they only play half the games together. Like, what a waste of, the general manager's money and the owner's time and efforts. But why would you pay for them if they're only playing 49% of the time? And yes, I do get it. Some of the time they were actually going through real injuries, but a lot of the time they were just load managing really small injuries that most other superstars would just play through. And then another thing with this team is that during the last year of this super team's history, in 2024, they acquired James Harden from the Brooklyn Nets. But the thing is, James Harden is not a good fit for this team. He didn't really help to this team due to his demand for the ball in hands at all times. It didn't help with things like spacing and ball movement, because he just wants the ball in his hands all the time and just wants to do a goddamn step back. And kinda adding to what I was saying before, a lot of the time James Harden was the only quote-unquote superstar on the floor for the Clippers, because Paul George and and Kawhi Leonard were always injured or load managing, so he could just do whatever the hell he wanted on the floor. He could have his step backs, he could have his 100 dribble moves without passing the ball. For most of this season, it was his team, because one of the two, or sometimes even both of them, were just injured. And so in the end, this super team just ended as a waste of talent, a waste of money, and just a poor overall super team. Because if your superstars aren't going to play, why are you paying them? And then because you're paying them so much, you can't build a decent team around them, it's poor. So now Paul George has left to the Philadelphia 76ers this offseason, and I feel like Kawhi's going to do the same thing when his contract ends. So if James Harden wants to keep playing, I guess it can be his team, but I think he'll get traded or something like that, or he'll complain again, because that's all James Harden does is complain. He'll just complain again, get traded out of there, and then ruin another team. In the 2020 offseason, 3 superstars in KD, Kyrie, and James Harden banded together to create the next quote-unquote Big 3. Although being claimed as the next Big 3, in 3 seasons, the best they achieved was a conference semi-finals appearance against the Bucks in 2021. Although, if KD didn't have his foot on the line, this Big 3 might have a championship. Another major issue with the Brooklyn Nets during this time period is that their big three was always injured. It was at least one of them that was always injured. They always had an injury. Due to injuries in total, all three of them only played 16 games together. So during that time period, all three of them were healthy for 16 games. So that means 99% of the time, for most of the games, at least one of them was injured. So that really wouldn't have helped their chances to win absolutely anything, because they were just always injured all the time, even worse than the Clippers were. Another really bad thing about this team is that Kyrie didn't want to take the COVID-19 vaccine during the pandemic, so that means he wasn't allowed to play for 2 seasons, because he didn't want to have a little jab in his right arm, because he believed in all these conspiracy theories that people were telling him, or he just read too much on the internet. So he just didn't want to get the jab, meaning he couldn't play. It's just a really selfish act, in my opinion, because you don't want to take a jab, so you're hampering your team, lessening their chances to make the Holy Grail Grand Final and win an NBA championship. So it's just really selfish. Why wouldn't you just take the jab, and then you have one of your superstars that you're still paying for, by the way. You still gotta pay him even if he doesn't play. He's gonna play if he just takes the damn jab. That would piss me off if I was an owner, just because you don't want to take a jab, so I've still got to pay you when you're not even playing. I thought that was absolutely ridiculous the first time I saw that. Another really major issue that I think this team had is that they had 3 major ball handlers in their team. They had, as their superstar duos, they had Kyrie Irving, they had James Harden, who are 2 really predominant ball handlers, and then you have KD, who is another guy that is a really dominant ball handler. So for your big 3, you have Kyrie, who loves the ball in his hand, just loves to dribble it around a bunch. You have James Harden, who loves to do a whole bunch of step backs and moves like that. Another really dominant ball handler. And then you have KD, who loves to, create step backs and stuff for himself, similar to what Paul George did just then. So you have 3 guys as your duo, as your trio, that need to help you win a championship, that have the ball in hands at all time. So that's not going to help with spacing. That's not going to help the role players play their roles, because if they can't play their roles, say you have a corner sitter, if he can't sit in the corner, well then, and if he doesn't get the ball when he's wide open in the corner, well then, what's his role? So they basically just had a 3-man show, and that just didn't work. Overall, I think the more disappointing team out of these 2 failed super teams is definitely the Brooklyn Nets, because if you look at the time that they spent together, their history in terms of how far they got and how long they spent together, for the amount of star talent they had, the amount that they had to be paid for, is absolutely crazy. Only playing 16 games together as a big 3 is crazy. You pay all that money and then they only play 16 games together. And then another really big blow is that Kyrie just didn't want to take the vaccine. That's just diabolical to me. You don't want to take a jab so you hinder your team and lose the ability to help your team. It's just crazy. And then they only played together for 2-3 seasons, and then they all chalked it and they all went elsewhere. Kyrie went to Dallas and everything like that. KD went to the Suns, and James Harden went to the Philadelphia 76ers. So it was blown up in less than 5 years. It's the shortest running super team ever. At least the Clippers had a longer run, a 5-year span. Instead, the Nets just had a good 3 years where they were actually competitive before they all blew it up. So that's going to be it for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help the channel grow.